I want you to think about the last time you walked into a room full of people you wanted to impress. Not a room of strangers, a room that mattered. Maybe it was a party, maybe it was a job, maybe it was her. And the moment you walked in, something shifted. A quiet, invisible pressure settled on your chest. Your eyes moved a little too fast. You laughed a little too quickly at something that wasn't that funny. You spoke before you thought. You filled silence that didn't need to be filled. You watched faces for signs of approval and adjusted yourself accordingly, slightly, unconsciously, constantly. You didn't notice it. You never do. But I did. I've watched men walk into rooms and give everything away in the first 10 seconds. Not their wallet, not their status, something more valuable, their composure, their authority, their presence. They hand it over like loose change, and they don't even realize they've done it until they're already on the outside of conversations they should have been leading. Here's what nobody tells you. Control is not something people take from you, it's something you surrender. Quietly, habitually, automatically. And the terrifying part is that most men have been doing it so long, they've confused surrender with personality. They call it being relaxed, being social, being real. But there's nothing real about a man who edits himself in real time based on the reaction of people who haven't earned that power over him. That ends today. Not because I'm going to teach you tricks, not because I'm going to hand you lines to say or poses to hold. What I'm going to give you is something heavier and more permanent than that. I'm going to show you the architecture of control, the framework that lives underneath everything, how you move, how you speak, how you respond, how you refuse to respond. And when you understand it at this level, you stop performing dominance. You start embodying it. This isn't about forcing control over others. It's about becoming the one people naturally adjust to. There's a difference. Learn it. The first law is this: control your emotions. Not suppress them, not deny them, control them. There is a version of you that feels everything first and thinks second. That version is dangerous. Not because emotions are weaknesses, but because unfiltered emotion is information handed directly to whoever is watching. And people are always watching. When you get visibly rattled by a comment, you've just told the room exactly where to press. When you light up with desperation at an opportunity, you've already negotiated against yourself. When you sulk, when you fume, when you get wounded in plain sight, you've made yourself readable. And a readable man is a manageable man. Controlled men feel everything. They process none of it publicly. Think about the most powerful people you've ever been around. There's a stillness to them that unsettles you without them doing a single aggressive thing. They don't broadcast their interior. They let you guess. And that uncertainty, that slight mystery of not knowing what they're really thinking, gives them an edge that no loud man in the room can compete with. Your emotions are not your enemy, but they are your currency, and right now, you're spending them in front of everyone for free. The practice is simple and brutal. The next time something moves you strongly, pause before you respond. Not forever, just long enough to choose. That pause is where control lives. The second law: control your reactions. Reaction is the language of the unguarded, and the world is constantly testing you. Someone disrespects you. Someone challenges your idea in front of a group. Someone ignores you when they should acknowledge you. Someone says something designed, consciously or not, to destabilize your frame. And in that moment, you have two choices. You can react, which means they now control the script, or you can respond, which means you do. Weak men react. They match energy. They escalate because they feel they have to. They get loud because they can't afford to be quiet. They argue in real time, unedited, at full emotional capacity. And they lose, not always the argument, but always the perception. Controlled men respond selectively, sometimes with words, sometimes with a look, sometimes with nothing at all. Let me tell you something about silence in moments of provocation. Silence, used deliberately, is one of the most psychologically disorienting responses you can give another person. They expected a reaction. They built their moment around your reaction. And when it doesn't come, when you just look at them calmly and let the moment breathe, something shifts. The energy they threw at you has nowhere to land. It comes back to them, and now they're the ones who look unstable. You don't have to win every confrontation vocally. Sometimes the most dominant thing in the room is the man who didn't flinch. The third law: control your words. Most men talk too much. I need you to understand this not as social advice, but as a fundamental law of power. Every word you say is a card you've laid on the table. Every explanation, every justification, every story you offer unsolicited, it's a bid for approval. It's a way of saying, please believe in me. Please validate what I'm doing. Please understand me. And the more you need to be understood, the more leverage others have over you. There's a pattern I've noticed in men who command rooms without trying. They don't fill silence. They don't rush to explain their decisions. They don't over-elaborate when a shorter answer would do. They say what's necessary and they stop. And that precision, that economy of words, creates weight. Because when a man speaks rarely and directly, people actually listen. When he speaks constantly, they stop hearing him entirely. Think about the last time you over-explained yourself. Why did you? Because somewhere underneath it, you were afraid that your answer alone wasn't enough, that you weren't enough, and that fear drove you to keep talking until you felt safe. Control your words means learning to feel safe with less. Say it once. Say it clearly. Stop. The words you don't say carry more authority than the ones you do. The fourth law: control your attention. Attention is power, and yours is being stolen constantly. Your attention tells people exactly what matters to you. When you give it freely, when your eyes chase every distraction, when you respond to every notification, when you light up every time someone looks at you, you've made yourself cheap. You've told the world that your focus is available to whoever asks for it. In social environments, especially around women, where you direct your attention is one of the most powerful non-verbal signals you send. The man who is constantly seeking eye contact, constantly scanning for approval, constantly monitoring how he's being received, he is not present, he is performing. And performance is exhausting to watch and impossible to respect. The controlled man's attention is selective. When he gives it, it means something. When he looks at you, you feel it, because you've noticed that he doesn't look at everyone that way. When he focuses on a conversation, the other person feels chosen rather than convenient. That selectivity is magnetic in a way that no amount of trying to be interesting can replicate. Take your attention back, not as arrogance, as self-possession. The things and people that deserve your full focus will earn it. Everything else gets less. The fifth law: control your time. Time is the most honest expression of what you value. And most men, if you looked at their days clearly, value other people's agendas more than their own. They're available when summoned. They rearrange themselves for people who wouldn't do the same. They respond immediately because waiting feels like rejection. They fill every gap with consumption because stillness makes them anxious. They are, in the truest sense, not in control of their own hours. A man who controls his time controls his life. Simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. Because what this really requires is the uncomfortable act of prioritizing yourself without apologizing for it, of saying no without a performance of guilt, of protecting your schedule like it belongs to you because it does. And when you start doing that, something strange happens. People begin to treat your time as valuable because you've shown them that it is. Think about the men you've looked up to. Did they seem constantly available? Did they pick up every call, answer every message within 30 seconds, drop everything the moment they were needed? No. And their unavailability wasn't rudeness. It was signal. It told you something was happening in their life more important than reacting to yours. That signal created respect you couldn't quite articulate, but felt immediately. Your time is the most finite resource you have. Spend it like you believe that. The sixth law: control your boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they're not coldness, they're not the absence of generosity. They are the definition of where you end and where everything else begins, and most men have never drawn that line. They've let relationships consume them. They've let environments shape them. They've let the comfort of others take precedence over their own clarity, and over time, without a single dramatic moment, they've lost the outline of who they are. They've become endlessly adaptable, endlessly accommodating, endlessly reachable, and entirely forgettable. Here's the dark truth about men with no boundaries. They are not loved more for it. They are used more. Because without limits, you've told the world that your space, your time, your energy are all available for the taking, and the world will take. Control of your boundaries is the act of deciding what is and isn't acceptable, and holding that decision not aggressively, but immovably. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it in a speech. You simply behave according to it consistently, and people will adjust. They always do. Because a man who holds his ground calmly, who isn't moved by guilt, by pressure, by emotional leverage, is a man people unconsciously understand has a relationship with himself that they cannot override. That relationship is the foundation of everything. The seventh law: control your need for validation. This is the one that will cost you the most to read honestly, because the need for validation runs deep, deeper than most men are willing to admit. It shows up in how you dress, not for yourself, but for the reaction, in how you post, watching the numbers, needing the confirmation, in how you tell stories, slightly exaggerated, shaped around what you think will land, in how you behave around people you want to impress, becoming a curated version of yourself rather than the actual one. You are chasing something from the outside that can only be built from the inside. And that chase is exhausting people. It's exhausting you. Validation seeking has a smell. And people can sense it before a single word is spoken. It's in the energy of someone who needs the room to agree with them. Who gets quiet when they're not included? Who subtly changes their opinion based on who they're speaking to? And what that smell communicates, underneath everything, is this: I don't fully believe in myself, so I need you to do it for me. No one respects that, not even the people who pretend to. The moment you stop requiring approval from the outside, not as performance, but genuinely because your internal sense of self is no longer contingent on external reaction, the entire dynamic shifts. You stop chasing, and the moment you stop chasing, people begin to wonder why you're not chasing them. And that curiosity is the beginning of genuine influence. The eighth law: control your presence. Presence is not charisma. Charisma can be performed. Presence cannot. Presence is what fills a room when a certain kind of person walks into it. Not because they're the loudest, not because they're the most attractive, not even because they're the most successful. It's because they carry themselves as though the space they occupy belongs to them naturally, as though they arrived not to be received, but simply to be. This is what people call frame. And frame is essentially the psychological gravity field you generate around yourself. Everything within your frame either adjusts to you or exits. And the strength of your frame is determined by one thing: how deeply you believe in your own reality. Weak frame looks like this. A man whose mood shifts based on who's in the room, who speaks differently to different people because he's always calibrating, who gets pulled off his center by a challenging question, a dismissive look, a woman who seems unimpressed. He's reactive to his environment, which means his environment controls him. Strong frame looks like this: a man who remains essentially himself regardless of where he is, who doesn't need the room to validate his energy for him to maintain it, who, when challenged, doesn't double down desperately or collapse. He simply doesn't move. And that steadiness, that refusal to be reshaped by external pressure, creates a kind of gravity that pulls people toward it rather than repelling them. You cannot fake this for long. You can only build it. And you build it by returning to yourself again and again. In every moment you feel the pressure to become something else. Hold your frame, not rigidly, solidly. The 9th law: control your silence. Silence is a language, and most men are illiterate in it. We've been trained to be uncomfortable with empty space. In conversation, in conflict, in attraction, the silence feels like a problem to be solved, so we solve it with words, with laughter, with movement, with anything that fills the gap and makes the discomfort go away, and in doing so, we reveal exactly how much the silence was controlling us. The man who is comfortable in silence is a rare and unsettling thing. In conversation, strategic silence creates weight. You say something meaningful, and then you stop, and you let it sit, and you resist the urge to cushion it, and you watch the other person's relationship with that weight. In attraction, silence after a charged moment is almost unbearably powerful. In conflict, silence in the face of provocation resets every expectation. In a group setting, the man who laughs last, who speaks last, who waits while others scramble to fill the air, that man already owns the room. This is not about being cold, not about being withholding or theatrical. It's about being comfortable enough in your own presence that silence doesn't feel like a threat. That you don't need to perform for it to be okay. Practice being still. Practice saying less. Let silence do the work that too many words have been failing to do. The 10th law, and the heaviest: control yourself under pressure. Everything before this moment was practice. This is the exam, because pressure strips everything away. Pressure removes the performance. Pressure dissolves the constructed version and leaves only what you actually are underneath. And if what's underneath is still reactive, still needing, still anxious, it will show. And it will show at exactly the moment it matters most. Most men don't know who they are under pressure because they've spent their lives avoiding it. They've chosen comfort over collision, safety over friction. And so the first real test, the first conversation that could collapse them, the first room that doesn't welcome them, the first rejection that stings, the first situation that doesn't go as planned, finds them completely unprepared. The controlled man is not immune to pressure. He's been trained by it. He has deliberately walked into uncomfortable rooms, held difficult conversations without escape hatches, sat with rejection without running from it, failed in front of people, and remained. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he decided long before the moment arrived that his internal state was not available for external events to dictate. This is the final law, because it is the culmination of all the others. your emotions controlled, your reactions measured, your words precise, your attention directed, your time protected, your boundaries held, your validation internal, your presence solid, your silence weaponized. Under pressure, all of that either holds or it doesn't, and whether it holds is determined entirely by the depth of your relationship with yourself. That relationship is the work. So here is what I want you to understand as we reach the end of this. Everything you've just heard is not about dominating other people. It's not about making people feel small or bending the world to your ego. The man who chases control over others is still, at his core, being controlled by his own insecurity, his own hunger, his own need to prove something. This is about something quieter and more powerful than that. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to take control because he already carries it in his posture, in his patience, in his refusal to be moved by things that don't deserve that power over him, in the way he enters a room and doesn't immediately begin editing himself for it. People are drawn to that, unconsciously, deeply, consistently. And they can't always explain why. They just know there is something different about how it feels to be around him. Something settled, something real, something that doesn't need them and is somehow, because of that, exactly what they want. Reactive men are managed. Controlled men are followed. The transformation isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It happens in the small moments, the pause before a reaction, the word left unsaid, the room entered without performance, the silence held when everything in you wanted to speak, the boundary maintained when guilt tried to dissolve it, the pressure absorbed without collapse. It happens in 10,000 private moments that no one sees, until suddenly people see the result, and they don't know what changed, only that something did. The moment you stop chasing control is the moment you start having it. That's the only law, but contains all the others. Now decide if you're ready to live by it.